Today, I'm honored to welcome Deborah Anderson, an artist, filmmaker, teacher, and spirit weaver, known for her award-winning documentary Women of the White Buffalo and her celebrated photography. Deborah's true essence shines through her work as a channel and founder of the Aura pathway. She bridges storytelling, ancestral wisdom, and guidance from the unseen realms to help us remember who we truly are. Her latest project, The Lost Language of Earth, invites us to listen to the voice of Mother Earth at a time of profound global change. Deborah, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Merci.
Yes, we've just discovered that Deborah speaks fluently French, but we've decided to do the podcast in English for everybody.
Even though I speak, it makes me want to speak French.
Thank you. And you speak with a perfect accent, I must say, as well, so kudos to you.
Merci.
All right, so Deborah, we are going to learn more about you today. And first question for you, you've described yourself as a channel and spirit weaver. So I was tempted to ask you, can you take us back to your childhood, if that is relevant? Because I'd like to know, when did you first sense this connection to the unseen realms, and how did it shape the path you've walked so far?
Yes, it's a to claim anything like that, I always knew I would have to be ready. It's something that's been a part of my world my whole life. Yet I didn't feel I was fully embodying my gifts and knowing how to hold them. And then how would they be helpful in my life, you know? So as a child growing up, my father is a channel. My father is a singer I may as well just start with this, you know, because it's relevant to my story. You know, our parents are the beginning of our experiences, right? Our parents are the ones that show us the way right at the beginning, good or bad or indifferent, whatever that looks to you in the moment. My father is the lead singer of the band Yes. And my growing up was all about being in his vortex, and his music has always spoken about consciousness and the divine and expanded consciousness with his lyrics. And he was reading some amazing books, Carlos Castaneda, Hermann Hesse. As he was writing his music, he was very influenced by obviously the scene of the 60s and 70s and psychedelics and such. So I was around that frequency growing up. And so it was something that you couldn't avoid. It was in my house. It was around me constantly. And the types of artists that would come in really influenced that. You know, there was a lot of indigenous people that came to the house. There was a lot of my father recording with Native American Indians and such. And so it was just around me. And I kept it as a thing that I knew to be a truth. And yet when I spoke about it, when I started to share with my friends, and as I was growing up and I ended up going to boarding school, they thought I was crazy. They thought I was mad. There was something in it that didn't resonate with them. And so I knew very early on in my life just to keep it quiet. The timing wasn't right to delve into that part of my knowing. You know, it was very deep knowing. I did have about 20 decks of tarot cards by the age of 19. So that could have been a hint as to what was happening. You know, they always say, you know, I've moved so often, Ingrid, over the years, and my belongings become more compressed and I have less and less things, which always feels so good. And my library becomes more fine-tuned. And I had incredible photography books. And, you know, as you develop your skills in the arts, you know, you're being gifted all these amazing inspirational pieces, right? And I gave them all away. And I gave so many of my books away. And the sort of very small now library that I have is all about consciousness and tarot and esoteric understanding and witches, and, you know, everything from channeling the unseen realms, channeling spirits that have passed from this experience and are now around us, to astrology. And so, yeah, I'm really aware of, you know, if you look at your library of books, it should tell a lot about who you are.
Yeah, I also find when we grow up, age, mature, we gain more and more confidence about our own taste, about being more aligned with ourselves. So that kind of really makes sense as well. So you were talking of your traveling. So I also wanted to talk about that because if I'm right, are you from England originally?
I was born in London, yes. I was born in London. And because of the nature of my dad's work, there was a lot of traveling. And we lived in south of France, hence where I learned to speak French. And I was there for a while. And Barbados was a really big part of my growing up. And that's really part of my African roots, my Caribbean roots. My grandfather is from West Africa, and my family on my mom's side are West African and Caribbean Indian, indigenous. So being there and growing up there, I got to really be in that energy of, I'm going to say, my people, even though they were displaced, Barbados being back in the day, one of the capitals of slavery, they were bringing all of the West Africans to Barbados. And then Barbados was the hub where they were sold out into the rest of the islands and then into America. So there's a rich history there, and there's a really powerful energy around which feel I just always feel into that. My dreams are always so profound in Barbados, into the unseen realms. I think there's just a lot of sadness in their history because of the slavery and such. So I grew up with that energy and was always intrigued as far as like indigenous understanding and kind of voodoo and just I don't know, just something just a little different. But then I was sent to a boarding school. They were very not different, very much had me align with a curriculum day that wasn't truly my heart. And that's why I think everything sort of got pushed aside, and then it was more focused on must become something. And I fell very deeply into the arts.
Okay, yeah. And so, am I right to say you settled in the United States as well? Currently, you are in Costa Rica. We are going to talk a bit about that. But how did your creative journey unfold then throughout your different settlements? I don't know if I can say it like this.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's so interesting. The land always informs my journey. My dad had moved to America, so he was living in California. And ultimately, I wanted to live with him because my whole childhood was him touring and never at home. And I was between boarding school and Barbados. So finally, in my late I moved to LA. Shock horror. My dad had to then deal with me and my brother. And he was like, I don't know if he was really equipped to have two teenagers that were a little bit wild and not too sure who we were at that moment. So we moved in with him in California. And that, then again, we got to see a lot of artists and a lot of his friends come visit, and a mixture of amazing people. I was sharing with somebody the other day that Bashar, who's a very known channeler, he came to our house and he would do his thing. And my brother and I would spend a lot of time laughing, like, who's the crazy person in the room speaking in different languages or different tongues? My dad's sitting in what would look like a teepee without the actual covering. So they would just be these triangle spaces that he'd create with hanging crystals, and he'd be meditating in those. And it was a wild childhood, because you see a lot of this energy that you look at that time in the 80s and early 90s to be woo woo and, oh, those people, those hippies. And now it's funny because somebody said to me the other day, oh, you're so hippie. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's like the most archaic word you could use to describe who I am. A hippie. It's like, that seems so old now. It's like everybody's awake, everybody's a channeler, everybody's, if you look on Instagram, I don't know if it's just my algorithm, but I feel like everybody's got something to
Yes,
about
I think it traces you and your interest, I'm afraid.
yeah, it's kind of
Quite interested actually in tarot and extra since last year, and I watch some sometimes on TikTok or whatever. But once you watch once, this is what they give you again and again. So that's just how it works. So that really gives us a flavor of your own universe. You've also had a very rich career as a photographer and filmmaker, and we'll share a link to your work. If we look beneath the surface of this creative career, would you say that your connection to spirit has always been present in your creative process? How has it worked with you? Because you were talking about not forcefully owning it so much as a child, and then perhaps more and more.
I think I was always taking photos of my friends when it was film cameras. I used to always take photos. I was always, but never taking it seriously. It was just something that I would love to do. I would just love to be present with what I was witnessing in my experience in certain moments in my life. And so the spiritual piece, or the sort of seeing piece, didn't really emerge fully as an awakening, let's say, a state of a moment of like, okay, what's happening, until I was 28. Before then, I was like any other young adult trying to figure it out. Drugs and partying and going out and trying to understand what does it all mean? What does this all mean? And trying to find a career. And I was singing, and I had released a song. God, I think it was 1990 or 1988. It's like such a long time ago. Oh no, it was 1996. My goodness, my dates all over the place. When I was in my mid-20s, I did a drum and bass track with a guy called Alex Reese called Feel the Sunshine. And I kind of fell into the London scene and a lot of going out, a lot of ecstasy. I look at these moments as exploration. It wasn't escapism. I wasn't trying to leave my world to find another. I just realized that you have these moments in your life that you're strong enough to be able to do these terrible things to your body and to your mind. I think about, drinking and such. Well, now, because once I think I reached 40, the hangovers were just the worst. The idea of consuming alcohol just didn't work with my frequency anymore. So you're in that exploratory space, and I wanted to do many things creatively. I had a clothing line back in the 90s, and moved to Paris, and I was taking photos of models, and I was building. Let's say I was building my repertoire as an artist. I was really exploring all the different avenues and all the different ways in which I could express myself. It wasn't spiritually led. I was a meditator I started meditating at the age of 19. My dad was very much wanting me to find a spiritual practice, and he had introduced me to his spiritual teacher, Divine Mother Flora. And I remember I met with her several times in Los Angeles, and she said, "So, my dear, are you meditating?" I was like, "No, but I'm thinking about it." She's like, "This is I would think about it all the time, but just getting into that place of stillness. And again, I'm in this exploratory space. And back in the 80s and 90s, it wasn't about meditation in the way that it is now. I don't believe that at that it was about finding yourself and going on retreats and yoga, and we're in a totally different world now. I almost feel that had I been 21, 22 now, with everything available to me, it would have been a very different seascape of what I would have dove into, because I so wanted to connect spiritually. Just nobody else around me was doing that. So I avoided it. I knew it was a part of me. Like I said, I was doing tarot card readings to all my friends from the age of 19, but that I kept it separate. I remember a couple of friends, "Oh, look, you think you're so spiritual, this judgment of my constantly speaking about something beyond this." And so you quieten that, and I focused on my career as an artist, and I just developed my skills. So spirit didn't inform my creativity per se until later on. It took a while for that to become something that was important.
Okay, very interesting. I love this whole exploration phase, which also shows you're very creative, because that's what creatives do. I always say you can't put creativity in a box, you need to let it flow, and then eventually you find your path. Now, moving forward to today, you founded the Aura Pathway as a way of helping people connect to their own unseen guides. Can you explain what the Aura Pathway is and how it came into being through you? I'm very intrigued by this myself.
Of course, I know it's well, I think this the segue is this idea of, you avoid the very thing that you are because you're in this exploratory space. And I would say that it is necessary for us all to go into that exploration space, because if you don't, you find yourself, if you were to dive straight into this gift, which I have really worked on and I've really spent time with, and I have a beautiful mentor, and I'll speak a bit about that. I'd always be wondering what was the thing I missed. And now I know, I feel like I did a lot, and I've explored so many parts of my being, because we are these expansive spirits incarnated in this beautiful body that, in my meditation, I am shown so often as I'm traveling in my meditation, this multiple possibilities of being, the multiple universes that we can step into. And we are unfortunately so siphoned into this very small portal of understanding. And we don't realize that actually there's just so much more available to us. And so I'm glad I had the opportunity to do this exploration and to really hone in on my gifts as an artist and really develop photography became it felt like a beautiful, an easeful way to be creative, because I'd have my camera, I'd take the photos, and I can go home and I could be in control of that environment. It wasn't 20 other people involved in what it is that I've just photographed. It's just me, the camera, the subject, the beginning. As you expand and you start doing bigger jobs, the team gets bigger, and then yes, there are more eyes on the prize. But in the beginnings of that, it was a very intimate space. I feel like I've come full circle because I'm sort of back in that more intimacy space again with the way I create now. But the Aura pathway was something that really showed up just over a year and a half ago. I was living in upstate New York. I was in a space of what is my next? What am I going to speak to? I'd just come off of releasing my last film, Women of the White Buffalo, about the Lakota tribe. I'd spent 4 years in that space, and I was really questioning my creative abilities and the state of the world and what is it that I need to say. And I get a call from Eve Ensler, who wrote the Vagina Monologues 30 years ago, wanting to make a film with me about her story, the sort of development of that path that she took. And, I said to her, she is a healer and a medicine woman and a weaver on so many levels. And the fact that I got to spend so much time with her was just phenomenal. So we did a couple of short films, which we've released. The bigger piece didn't happen. She stood back and suddenly went, you know what? I don't want to tell my story yet. Just being that humble medicine woman, she wouldn't use those words, but supporting other women globally, doing the work that she does. She just wanted to get on with that and not be the fanfare or being on a pedestal or on a stage to promote herself. She was like, no, I want to be the humble servant to this experience that I'm here having, which is to hold space for these women globally. And she does an immense thing holding that space with such beautiful women around her. So I stood back. I was like, so what am I doing? And I had a session with a woman in upstate New York called Sabra, who is so in her gift, so powerful. And it was a birthday gift from a wonderful friend who's also awake in many ways, and she's in the film business, Jen Venditti. She said, I have a birthday gift for you, and you're going to meet this woman, Sabra. I think you should have a reading with her. I was like, sure. We all love a reading. We're like, that sounds great, especially in these moments of crossroad, right? Where you're like, where am I facing? What is it that I need to say at this point in my life? And Sabra started the reading by saying there's a woman that's come in and she is speaking a language I don't understand. And I'm like, okay. She goes, she's a grandmother. And I'm like, a grandmother that doesn't, because my grandmothers speak English. And then I'm like, well, it could be my great grandmother's, the African energy, the West African, the Caribbean energy. Who knows, right? It could have French on my dad's side. Even I have French ancestry. And she's like, she wants to thank you for the work that you've done. And I'm like, oh my God, it's Carol Einroop Herrera. She's the grandmother, the matriarch of the film Women of the White Buffalo, the first woman that I connected to when I went to South Dakota and spoke with, and she passed away when I completed the film. And I always felt that she stayed around to help make the film with me. And when she passed, the day that she passed, she came to see me. I felt her show up in my house, in my living room, and I had this beautiful music that I was listening to, and she started dancing with me, and I just started crying and dancing with her spirit, and she said, all is well, all is well. And I got a call from one of her sisters, one of the Lakota women. She said, Carol has passed. And I couldn't speak. I was just like, wow, I've just spent 4 years with this woman where I got to understand the Lakota people, the Lakota way, their way of ceremony. I did the last sweat with her people, listening to their music, to their sounds, to their song, it just, all of the things came racing through. I was like, wow, why me? Did I get this opportunity to be with these people, to tell their story? And she really was my guide, this angel next to my side. So the medium said, Sabra, she said, she wants to thank you. And and I said, I know who it is. And I told her, it's Carol Einrip Herrera. She's this Lakota woman who helped me. And she said, oh, okay. She said, well, she's showing me her shoes. And of course, like any psychic may take that opportunity, or a medium, to say, oh, she's wearing moccasins. I've just described, she's a Lakota woman. And she says, I said, yes. Showing me, Sabra said, she's showing me her shoes, and they are black, and they have 2 Velcro straps. They're little booties. And I'm like, got to be kidding me. They're the shoes that I gifted her because she had issues with her hands. She was very unwell, basically, and she couldn't tie up her laces on her shoes, on her boots. So I bought her these shoes with these Velcro straps. Nobody knew that. Nobody. And I just went, it's her. And she said she needs you to know that she's here right now. And she wants you to know that you're right at the beginning of your journey. This is just the beginning. You have a lot ahead of you. And I was almost like, oh my God. I was like, no, because I just came out of this film. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've just held such immense space for Women of the White Buffalo, and for her to say, you're just at the beginning. And I think she even said, and I think you know what I'm talking about. I think she even said that. And I was just like, I do. And I just didn't want to own it, that there's more to this experience. Many other things came through on that reading that were just too, and you just wouldn't know unless you knew, I actually shared the other person that came through was my godfather, Vangelis, who wrote the theme music for Chariots of Fire, the film, and he won an Oscar for this theme tune. And he had passed away with the COVID moment a year before. And I was very sad because I hadn't seen him in my grown-up years. And when he passed, it just brought a lot to the forefront of wishing I'd spent more time with him. However, I spent a lot of time with him as a child. And when he came through, she described him first as an uncle. And I was like, well, none of my uncles have died. She said, he's very close to your father, and he's in the music business. And I was like, yeah. And I'm not saying anything. And she goes, he's showing me a scene from a film of these men running down the beach, which is the famous scene with the piece of music that won the Oscar. And I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. I remember telling my dad, he was just shocked. But the beautiful thing was, I'm so grateful for the time that we had together. He never had children. And she said, he never had children. He wants you to know that the time that you both had was very precious to him. And he has immense love for you. But what he kept saying was, I can't believe there's something more. And I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, he keeps saying to me, I can't believe, and I could just imagine him looking around in this other world, in the unseen realms, going, wow, there's more than just life on planet Earth. There's more than just being in the human vehicle. And it was so apparent that he didn't have that belief when he was Vangelis in this body, doing that journey in his lifetime. So when he passed, he saw that there was something else that was way bigger. And he kept saying it throughout the reading, how shocked he was and how beautiful it was and just how big and immense. So that was my story with Sabra. And another friend of mine passed away a couple of months later, and I called her back because he was constantly talking with me. I could just feel his presence. And I said, could I get a session with you? And she's busy. So had to wait a month, and then I finally get to sit with her. And she goes, oh, and she mentions him, and she describes how he's dressed, so very him. And she tells me how he'd passed, which I knew he'd passed from drowning. It was a very unfortunate accident. And I said, I know, I keep seeing him. And she said, I know you can see him. That's your gift. And I just burst into tears. And I said, you know what? I'm kind of over hearing this about my gifts. Would you be my mentor? Because I know you have this dialed in. You are so connected. Names, places, dates. She's amazing, you know? And she said it would be my honor to work with you. So I spent last year, January, February, March, April, like 4 months working with her weekly on really developing and honing in on my ability to see into the other realms. And then I gifted her a session. And I've been doing this for a very long time. I just didn't fully own it. And she said, if you're ready to make the vow for your gift and to fully step into this, then I'm here to support you, but you have to make the vow and you will be tested. So that was basically it. I went in fully prepared to step into this space and use it so that I could support other people on their journey. And that was how the Aura Pathway was born. And the Aura, ORA, stands for Original Resonance Alignment. So your original state of being. What I tap into is your spirit. I tap into that pure consciousness piece, and that's your original state of being, not the human body. So I started to do one-on-ones, and then it just kind of unfolded where I sort of built, I don't want to say the business because it really isn't that, and it doesn't feel like that, but I built this space that allows for people to meet with me and meet with their guides. And I see it all in visuals. So when I close my eyes, I just recount what I see with my eyes, you know, whatever's coming in, like I'm watching a TV screen. And the same principle was how I made Women of the White Buffalo. It was a meditation. It was a listening. It was hearing what my guides told me it would be or it would look like. And and then I started to go back in my career and I go, oh, it's always been that. I've always been channeling and listening and waiting for them to show me and guide me. Now I can put a word to it, or I can put an understanding to it. And there's a confidence now behind it. You know, she would do things. Sabra would send a photo of her hand closed and in a text message, what's my hand? And I would just go into my zone and I'd see a green rock and I'd write her back a green stone. And then she'd send a photo of her hand open and it was a piece of jade. She did all sorts of things, you know, photographs of people who have passed, and she'd show me the back of the photograph and she's like, can you see, what can you see? And I'd be able to tell her how they died. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, to be really honest, I mean, this is a skill that we all have, and we just have to learn into and trust what we see. And I worked on my skill set and I started to watch a ton of videos with other seers and famous psychics, and they're all saying the same thing. If you listen, if you really watch them, you can see how they're doing it. It didn't feel, it just had lots of aha moments where I went, oh, I've been doing this pretty much my entire life. I just didn't know I was.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing with us these stories, Deborah, and how it works for you as well. Oh, I love that. I really don't believe in coincidence, because I love how you started by telling us that exploration is important and it's not forcefully straight away getting into your gifts. And I really love that. And myself, the past 5 years, I've been for a lot of exploration. I call it a bit of a chaotic period for me, but it's kind of necessary to kind of almost become a different version of yourself. Without that, you can't grow and you can't become something. And the past 2 years, I had never done this before, but I've actually done some readings with a psychic. I've actually done only 3 the past 2 years, and I've actually done one last week, the 3rd one. And I've never done ancestors, and I don't really have someone close to me who passed away. So perhaps that's also why, apart from dogs, a very important part of the family. But I actually find it really reassuring and such a beautiful energy exchange as well, because what I love, and I think it was very apparent in what you shared with us, there are these layers of the realm where we are, but there are other layers and they coexist together, and how it works, nobody really knows, but it is there, isn't it?
I mean, there's so much just to say to that. So I know you said, and dogs, like, oh, and them. They're the most important. But I
I
will
love
say,
dogs. I'm a big dog lover.
because I'll share I mean, clearly I have a lot of stories around finding this path. My dog, Saskia, who was a shepherd, passed away 2 years ago. And when she was dying, she was it's not the first time that I've seen the spirit leave the vehicle, of my animals. It was very unexpected, and I wasn't. She basically was good in the afternoon, and then she died that night. Right? She started internally bleeding. I'm in the hospital. It's all happening so fast, and I'm looking at her, and I'm like, wait, what's when you suddenly have to make it make sense that your dog's going. I was like, wait, it's the end. And I looked at her and I brought in Brando, who's still with me. I'm pointing at him. He's over there sleeping. He's now 15 and a half. And he was lying to her and he was looking at me confused. He could feel something was happening. And I put her hand and his hand on top of my hand. And I sandwiched our three hands, the three of us, in just gratitude for this 10 years of this immense relationship that we had that was so beautiful and so perfect. And I said, this was perfect. This was perfect. Thank you. Just really honoring that it doesn't matter what form the spirit chooses to come in and be with you. The spirit is very much alive and well in that being. So she left. She changed form into I told her, you're ready to go. I'm here. I'm opening that door with you. I'm letting you go with love and just thank you, and sort of stumbling on my words, right? As you're in that moment of pure shock. And in some ways, like the nightmare that you wish would never happen, that your dogs are finally going to leave because they don't last long enough, Ingrid. What she
Gosh.
what she showed me was this energy leaving her body. I closed my eyes, and it had wings, very small. It had wings, energy, and then it just got bigger. Not too dramatic, not like an angel filled the room. It wasn't like that. It just very delicate, and I knew she was gone. And then I looked at her, and she just wasn't there. Saskia, the Saskia I knew, was not in the room anymore. It was just the body of a dog. And just the feeling, I was like, oh, this is the most bizarre thing because my last dog, when it died in my arms, I handed it over and I kept my eyes closed. This was very different. This was, I got to be with her. And in my hand, I had a collar, her collar. And it's a red leather collar, and I'm holding it, and I said, you know what, I was in shock. I put it back on her and I said, so they know who you are. It's got your name on it. I don't know what I was thinking. I was thinking the other world, they'll know who you are. When she gets cremated, it'll be the right dog that cremating, but they'll know who you are. That was my main reason for putting the collar back on. And I left, and she started to talk to me. As I'm driving home in total shock, it's midnight, she starts to come in. She says, I have always been with you, and I will always be with you. I'm with you now, and now where I'm standing, I can be with you in a totally different capacity, and I'm going to help you, and I'm going to guide you in this understanding of who you truly are. It was as clear as day. There was a star up in the sky. I'm driving, one star as bright as you. It's like I was following this North Star kind of energy. And she said, here I am. I'm a star. I come from the stars, and we all come from the stars. And she starts sharing this wisdom. I won't speak too much to it because we all have our own belief system. But the piece that really resonated was, I am still here. I have not gone anywhere. I'm just in a different, frequency, and I'm still available to you, and I will take care of you. So
Yeah.
I'm in shock. I somehow am in and out of sleep, trying to make sense of what's happened. I send some weird cryptic text message to like 5 of my friends, sort of, Saskia's on her journey. I don't think half of them didn't know quite what I was talking about, but the idea was, she's left the body. And my girlfriend comes running over at, 7 in the morning, crying her eyes out. She's like, oh my God, oh my God. I said, it's so peculiar. She's still here. And we got to talk a little about it. She said, Deborah, the crazy thing is, she goes, I have a reading with Sabra this afternoon. The psychic, the medium. She goes, you should take it. And I said, no, she's already talking to me. You take it. All is well. I feel very connected. My friend goes, sorry, it's a little bit of a long story. She goes to take the meeting with Sabra. And at the end of her session, she says, my friend just lost her dog. Are there any messages? And Sabra, she closes her eyes. This is how she recounted. Jen shared the story. She said she closed her eyes. Oh, it was so easy. It was such an easy passing. She goes, oh no, all is well. I am well. And she goes, she's just showing me her red collar. That's all I needed to hear. It was the red collar. I put it back on. It was for me to know. It wasn't for anybody else. It was so that I knew that that really was her. And moving on from that, and then spending time working with Sabra, Saskia has shown up many, many times to remind me to trust what I see. She's even come in when I was working with Sabra. Sabra said, I think your dog came to see me last night in my dreams. I'm like, yes. And she described, she'd never met her. She described her not physically so much as the energy, smiley and bouncy. I went, that's Saskia. She said, the message is she wants you to trust what you see. And so that has been really my guiding light, is to trust what I see in everything. And when I do the Aura Pathway work with others, we do group meditations weekly, and I get to guide people home to their original state of being. And I get to bring in that light and expand the space beyond what we see as our reality. And in that, I always say, trust what you are seeing. And I always start with this idea of, use your imagination, right? I'll take you on the journey to leave this physical realm and just imagine, use your imagination, because the imagination will then become your reality. And that's, the many Aura paths.
Oh, that's beautiful, Deborah. And just to finish on my story, the psychic I've been meeting has actually created a program where she invites people to do exactly what you said, to learn to channel. As you said, everybody can. Not everybody is perhaps equally gifted in channeling, but everybody can, in essence. And it's a question of focusing on it, I guess. So through the Aura pathway, Deborah, you've worked with diverse groups of people. Can you share perhaps an example? You brought it to life very well already, but can you share an example of perhaps how someone's life has shifted after accesses their own channeling, their own team of people, or in another realm through the Aura pathway?
Yeah, when I do the one-on-ones, even with the groups are so beautiful because we all get to reflect and speak with one another as to sort of what it is that we're feeling. I think the biggest piece is it allows for expansion. It allows for something outside of the everyday normal experience. It allows for this connection to source, to your light, to your gifts. It allows for a remembrance of your innate truth. And that's the very thing that I think, in going to school and being around humans who are sleeping, it can be even your parents, you shut down that innate knowing. That's something that you're born with. You're awake when you're born. You're very clear and connected. And throughout time, you get into these relationships that basically shut down that connectivity. That it's like an umbilical cord to the higher realms, the unseen realms, to your truth. I'm really careful about the words that I use because, and also with the Aura pathway, I really want people to use their own imagination and understanding and put their own words to it. There is we're in such a woke space right now, and the spiritual space is so flooded with everybody's idea of what God looks like and what spirit is. And so my idea with the Aura pathway is to really bring you back to yourself, that you became reliant on yourself and not me or the work or my way. It's like the idea is that you are sovereign to your own practice and you get to connect. So I try to be very open in the way I bring you into that center. And it always starts with the breath. It's just this, the long and short, the beginning and end of everything is breath. The idea that if you don't breathe in oxygen, you will fall unconscious. So this idea of, you breathing in this consciousness, you're sort of connected to this beautiful reciprocal energy of the oxygen going into your system. So I'm having you speak to that first. I hear my breath. I feel my body expanding and contracting and rooting and grounding. And in that expansive space, you start to have an opportunity to step out of this and into something that is, I believe, greater. And unfortunately, we're so fractured from, we're so disconnected from, and yet is the very source of who we are. So as an example, I had a client, he came in, he teaches Taekwondo, and he lay down in front of me, and it's different every time. I do a lot of online work, and he's closing his eyes, I'm closing mine, and I go into my field, and what I see is this man coming toward me, ancient time it feels like, with these mountains and this desert, and he's riding a horse, and he looks to be something ancient, I could say Mongolian, or he's this warrior, he has armor, and he's on his arm, he has a bird. And they show me that the bird is wearing one of those helmets. So I said, oh, it's a falcon. And I think it's somewhere behind me, the encyclopedia of symbolism. There's, when you're doing this work, they'll show you symbols. It's almost like you're decoding a puzzle. When they speak with you, it's not verbatim, word for word, scripted. It can be very out there, and you just have to sort of grab the pieces that make sense. And so I'm sitting there, I'm looking at this warrior, he's on a horse, and on his arm he has this bird of prey. And then they start showing me the viewpoint that the bird has looking down. The eyes of this bird are the eyes of this warrior. So the man lying in front of me, he's like, Deborah. And I'm like, no, wait, I'm still. He goes, no, Deborah. And I said, well, no, I just want to describe more of what I'm seeing. He goes, Deborah. And I open my eyes. He goes, I have to show you. And he lifts up his shirt, and on his chest is a massive falcon tattooed on his chest.
Oh.
I know what you're talking about. And I'm just like, what? And the reading just continued like that. It was just this immense connection to his path, his journey. And I start moving my body like I'm actually doing the Taekwondo and the energy of what he does. And I said, you're able to tap into something, to work with the wind, to work with that spirit. And that is and he just couldn't get over it, because he's like, that's exactly what I'm trying to work on. And I needed to unblock. So look, I can give you so many examples of that, of what they show me that comes in that may not make much sense to me. I just have to trust what I see. And it totally makes sense to them, because it's like giving them permission to step into their power. That is all we want to do, is to step into our power. And sometimes it takes another person to be able to see it, something that you've never shared before. I had a reading, and then me getting to see it and solidifying the thought. They're like, oh my God, how would you know that? There was a woman, when I was scanning her body in our session, I saw a black hole in her neck. And then I saw a butterfly on her neck. And she said, okay, this is crazy. I've had an operation here. I had cancer. And the butterfly describes the very thing that was removed. It's the way that it looks in the body. It looks like the shape of a butterfly. And it was removed, and I could see or sense that, spiritually speaking, they hadn't closed the wound properly, and the cancer had spread, and it was now in her lungs. And she said, yes, they were showing me this mass in her lung. I don't know how or why. I just trust how I see what I see. So I'm just learning every time I do the work to just trust what I see. And it's so different every time. There are spirits that come in that are elders, that are what came in that moment, were these, what looked to be these, I'm going to say, if you think of the Pope with his big hat and the cross, they looked like that, these spirits in white, very large. And then I realized the cross, again, symbolism, was to show me that this was the medical team that were here to support her. And they went in and they sewed up her neck and cleared whatever energy was stuck. And I said and then they went to her lung. And I said to her, this isn't a one session thing. this is really, in a way, a lifetime dedication to connecting to your team so that you can be supported all the time. And I think the bigger issue that I've witnessed is that people will come in and do 1, 2, 3 sessions, and it's a lot of work, and they kind of fall off the wagon, right? They don't really want to do the work. This work isn't for the faint of heart. I always say it's going to be the hardest path and yet the most rewarding. And yet I truly believe that as a species right now, humanity needs to jump in on this path and start doing their work to return to the essence of who they came forth to truly be. So she left with, we spent hours dissecting the mother wound, and this is why she got sick. And so everybody has their story. We carry all these stories with us. My work with the Aura Pathway is to support you in getting to the very seed of that story so that we can stop feeding it and allow that story to be healed so that you can be in a healed body and experience. I've worked with cancer patients where the cancer will speak to them through me and tell them whatever it is necessary to speak to, what it is that they need to learn or know. It's been profound.
It's a beautiful work to be doing, and also to embrace it and to accept to embrace it. I loved the word actually you used at the very beginning, that it's about expansion, and I think that can really resonate with so many people because it leaves it open enough. I think we can fairly say that as many people, as many experiences there will be, and we will experience it in different ways. So a last question on this topic, Deborah, which is deep, but links to the 2 projects we are going to discuss after. So how do you see this kind of channeling work helping humanity at this moment of global uncertainty and ecological crisis, because that's what we're seeing in the world very much today. And I love that you are talking about people need to do perhaps this work more and more, because I can really see more and more people are getting into it. The spiritual leaders, etc., I came across perhaps the past 2 years are all saying the same thing, that more and more people are doing that work. So it's actually really interesting.
The timeliness. I can say that because of my ability to see, it came through me, the idea to step into that last film that I made, Women of the White Buffalo, in my meditation. It was so clear. And then there was it's like, just listen, right? We don't pay enough attention. We're all in our little bubbles of our experience. When we really open up our eyes and listen, there are messages constantly being gifted to us. I'm in Palm Springs in California. I was living up in the mountains of Idlewild now 6 years ago, or 7 years ago. And I was in the store, the camera store, and I was having my camera cleaned. And this woman's talking about these wild horses in the reservation, on this Indian reservation, and the wild Mustangs and these photos that she wanted to take. And I was like, wild Mustangs and reservation. And I started to sort of see these visions of the Indians. I was like, the Indians, oh wow, living in LA. I remember them coming to my dad's house, some friends of his. But, got to say it, I had this romanticized idea of what that even looked like, modern day Native Americans. And I drove home and I happened to pass by a sign that said an Indian reservation, the name of an Indian reservation on my way up, which I'd never seen. I've been down this hill 10 times. I'd never seen this sign. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And I go home and I Google Native American Indian woman. And what comes back is so horrific to me, that there's an epidemic of murdered and missing Indigenous women. And we're not speaking about this. This is not normal news. This isn't on the news every day that these women are going missing by the thousands. This doesn't make any sense. And, in my meditation those following weeks, they kept showing me that I should make a film about this story. So when you talk about linking a gift to be able to see to work that we end up putting out into the world, nothing is within us. Nothing. Everything is coming through us. All our ideas come through us. There's, oh, I've got a song somewhere in here. No, you don't. The song comes through you. You know, we're channeling our energy, right? All the time, like channeling ideas and thoughts. Why do some people decide that they want to travel across the globe and make a film about it? Is because they usually have a dream about it. Something comes in, they're like, God, you know, you should really travel across the world. Or somebody might say something and then it comes in a way where it's just this idea that you can't let go of. So the ideas come through us and in a way speak to us in our dreams, in dream time, that allow us to solidify an idea that we're then, okay, I'm going to go and do this thing. And that kept happening for me. It was just, I could see myself going to a reservation, and it kind of was just me and my dogs and my little camera, and I was just going to go off, and very naive to think that that's how it would work. And I thought, okay, then I've got to make there's something about this. And at the time I got a phone call from ELLE to make a short film, which is a poem that she'd written, and Rosario Dawson, the actress, did the voiceover on this piece of film. It's like 6 minutes long, called My Revolution Begins in This Body. And I directed and created this piece of visual to go with this beautiful spoken word. And in that moment, I got to see a global issue with women going through some of the most, I mean, I can't even put words to how bad the experience of these women in this current timeline should not be happening, with the raping and taking and suppressing and silencing these women. And I kept seeing this image of this handprint. Again, these images coming through me of this red handprint. So I'm now Googling red handprint on Native American woman. Nothing. I don't see anything. So this was a visual that came into my dreams of this red handprint. So the next minute, I'm on a phone call to a friend that I know is connected to the Indigenous peoples. She's been in my life as a teacher, as an Indigenous Native teacher for many years, works in the spirit realms. Kate then says, I have somebody that you should connect with, because I said, I think I'm meant to make a film about the Indigenous peoples. And I know that my dad's lost contact with a lot of the people he was connected to, and they were a lot older. They're probably now in their 70s, 80s, if they're even alive, because it was when I was in my teens that they used to come to the house. And she said, I have somebody for you. And she put me in touch with a woman called Kumiko Hayashi, who was very connected to the Lakota tribe, because she used to go to the Sundance on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And she knew Carol Einrup Herrera. And that was basically how, through this meditation, through these images that were coming through this idea of this red handprint that I could see that wasn't, I was just sort of listening. It was all of a sudden flooding in, this idea. And they even showed me how I would film this film. I get to speak to Herrera because Kamiko Hayashi picks up the phone and says, we've been wanting to make a film about these people. You're possibly the person. I'm going to make a connection to the people. It was so fluid. It just worked so quickly. And before I knew it, within a month, literally from this idea, I must make a film, I'm now on the reservation and I'm sitting in the living room of Carol Einrup Herrera, who's saying to me, we've been waiting for you. I mean, there are many different steps in between. You know, an immense part of this was being able to connect to someone that could fund this project. And I was so fortunate to meet with all these people so quickly and seamlessly, it felt, so that I could go and make a film about the voices of the Lakota women that needed to be heard because they'd been silenced. I then create the image. I then put it out on social media. We hadn't even finished filming the film. And before you know it, it goes viral. And now the poster child for the murdered and missing Indigenous women movement is this red handprint on the faces of Indigenous women globally. And so that was how I fell into making Women of the White Buffalo. And I spent 4 years on and off the reservation. COVID hit. I'd finished the film prior to COVID. I waited till COVID was over, the louder voice of COVID, the beginning of COVID, because nobody wanted to speak about anything else. So I wanted to choose my time well so that people would listen to the film. And finally, it's now been 3 years since the film came out. And I do believe it made a difference in the world somewhere, in remembering our Indigenous sisters that needed to be seen and heard.
Yeah, and we were all Indigenous at some point.
We are.
But thank you. You covered a lot of ground, but just to set the scene for people watching and listening, so Woman of the White Buffalo was your latest project that has been released. So if people actually want to watch it, it is available online, and it is a beautiful documentary that you have created, telling the story of this woman. Perhaps I want to ask you two additional questions because you did cover a lot of ground. So as part of this documentary, you sat with women, which I found very interesting. So you sat with women ranging in age from 10 to 98. So I wanted to ask you, what did you learn from holding space from that rainbow of ages and perspectives across generations? Because that must have been quite special.
Yes. It came through the beginning of that journey as to how I would tell the story of these people. To me, it felt that again, it's something that came through in my meditation, that you need to find this range of age. By gluing together all of their stories, it will tell the one story. So that was a very clear piece as to the why I chose that. And indeed, it did, because you're getting a perspective from every single person from where they're standing in their timeline of what they're witnessing as a Lakota woman. From the 10-year-old who had a mother who was addicted to drugs and her journey and the remembrance of her people through the guardian that's in the film that was taking care of her, all the way through to Marie Brushbreaker, who was someone that was at Wounded Knee takeover in the 70s. And she was a part of a bigger voice with AIM, the American Indian movement. And just this incredible journey that she went through, it always brings you back to the same place, which is the connection to the ancestors. She would speak about, in being 8 years of age, her ancestors and being proud to be a Lakota woman. And then this young 10-year-old proud to be a young Lakota woman, remembering who she is. So there was these beautiful moments of synergy. And then, of course, in between all of that, those who have lost their way, those who are trying to find their way, the teacher seeing all these other children who don't care. And the fact that in America, the indigenous kids are being taught the American curriculum. They're not being taught their own history or their own language. That's not like you have to know your language at school. It's a secondary piece over here. So as Sunrose Ironshell says in the film, she's a school teacher. Why do we, as Lakota women or peoples, have to fit our understanding into your curriculum? You should be fitting your curriculum into our understanding. And this is the disconnect of our indigenous understanding, that we have been taken on this new pathway of understanding what we're here to be and do through the school system that is not connected to our indigenous ways at all. Not our language, not our medicine, not our spiritual life. So this was something that through speaking to all these different women, I got to have a little taste of that disconnect and how it's affected them. So it was a very, very cool experience for me.
Yeah, I find it really interesting also that you took the lens through women's eyes. I mean, there are so many conversations at the moment around what happened in the past, not only in North America, but in other parts of the world with, colonizations and wars and etc. Everything that went with it, sadly. That there is so much healing still to be done. And so much unhealing or healing that hasn't happened yet, that, these pieces of work are so important. And I really loved you focus particularly on women in this work. So I also wanted to ask you, what role do you feel women and women's voices hold in the global healing process right now? Because when we think of, colonization, war, men played a big role in that. So to look at healing or what's happening today from women's eyes, I actually find it quite symbolic.
Yeah, I heard stories which was so powerful in the making of Women of the White Buffalo. I obviously had to know the history myself because it wasn't taught to me at school. So I went on this rampage of reading as much as I could, listening to audiobooks, watching films, documentaries, all this. Listen, I came across this one story of when the white settlers had come and they went into one of the villages to sit with the indigenous peoples in, I think it was upstate New York, in that area. And basically these two men they said, take us to your chief. Take us to your chief. We'd like to speak with the chief. They didn't even know this word. So the chief, you know, when you think of the Native American Indian chief, this is a colonized word. This is not an indigenous word. And the bigger piece was they sent out this grandmother, and they were like, oh, okay, this is great. So could we speak to your leader? And she was standing there, and they said, no, you know, I think this was, you know, an hour in the making. And finally they got the indigenous peoples understood, the Indians understood that they wanted a man to come, and that they would understand the chief to be the masculine, the holder of this space. And so they sent out some man, and they said, the grandmothers, they sent out this man, and he said, I'm the chief. And they're like, okay, great, now we can talk. You know, I'm sure it didn't really go down exactly like that, but the idea, the essence is they were then willing to sit and talk. And then when they were able to speak to what they needed to, he said, I'm going to go and speak with my other, and he went back into the teepee and he sat with all the women. And the women then gave the advice as to what should be done or said. And then he went back out and he said, okay, so what we've discussed is, so in that, just that story alone, you know, this idea of the patriarchal infiltration into what really was a matriarchal system, we can see what it's done for our communities and for the people in general, just how we're running this global experience as a patriarchal, male-dominated experience. It's not doing very good. I don't think we're doing very, very good with this. I think we're kind of, you know, we're missing a few elements here. So it's not about the matriarch coming back and, you know, the women take over. It's about balance. It's about us finding this space of equilibrium and respect and honor, and holding the energy in the right balance in the right way will really bring all of this back into balance. So I think that what we've found in the past few years is the women are marching in the street and our voice must be heard, and, you know, hashtag whatever that looks like. I don't think that is truly the way forward. I truly believe that it isn't about us going out and screaming in the streets, our voices need to be heard. I believe it's, I see you, see us, find our equilibrium, our balance. Let's find that duality of a species, to be in communion with one another, to listen, communicate, and then feed into our strengths. You know, because yes, men hold a certain energy that is important. That divine masculine needs to be there. And then the women hold this beautiful feminine energy that's important. And that divine feminine energy needs to be there. But it has to be this beautiful symbiosis, you know, of a frequency of the totality of that. That creates the whole. That creates truly how we should be living on this planet, in this timeline, for sure.
Yeah. All about balance, and I think that brings us beautifully to your next project, because it's really about balance as well. So after Women of the White Buffalo, you've embarked on your next project with a beautiful, beautiful title, The Lost Language of Her. So can you tell us, how did this new project emerge for you? And perhaps in what ways is it a continuation of your earlier work, and what direction do you want to take with it?
Yes, the lost language of her being Mother Earth, and how we have forgotten her language. When I was sitting with the Lakota people, they were sharing that they have forgotten their language. That 10 years ago, there may be 10, 15,000 people that spoke the Lakota language. And now there's under 2,000 people that speak the Lakota language. And this language, which again, I was told when I was there, and it came through in one of my transmissions before I went, that the language is a living medicine. The language is ever evolving. And so for them to forget this medicine is a profound piece of their well-being that is being lost. And they also spoke about another language that is being lost, which is our connection to her, and our language, you know, with Mother Earth. And This is a global thing. Women of the White Buffalo was never, oh, the Lakota people that live on the poorest reservation in South Dakota, those people over there. I'm like, no, this is a mirror to the rest of the world. They're just showing us where we're headed. This disconnect from our truth, from that space of knowing. And so I wanted to make a film about women who still held the language, and it felt like that's where it was going. And shortly after I'd finished making Women of the White Buffalo and it was out in the world, I went and traveled across America and I interviewed various women that still hold this incredible connection to nature, that told me how they hear her speak and such, and the dreams that they have. And it was amazing. And I came back and I put together this little trailer, and the idea was to try and raise funds to make this film. But something was missing. My focus was in on women still holding the medicine of Mother Earth. And it's taken me 3 years to step out of that. And I realize now it's not about the women that hold the language. It's about us forgetting her language and how we need to remember in order to flourish. That reconnection is the everything that we need in this timeline, because we are her and she is us. So in the past 4 months of bringing this back into alignment and it becoming alive again, this project, as I start to pull in my team and I'm doing a ton of work, and again, watching films and listening to the common denominator and the languaging currently in that space of spiritual awareness. There's a lot of speaking voices at the moment to this specific subject, a lot of people talking about it. And I realize those who are tuned into the same radio station, I say, are very much speaking to this idea. We remember her, the very essence that we are, this connection to her, and understanding consciousness, what really consciousness is, what it really means. We will be on a fast track to healing the global epidemic of disconnect from our well-being. Like we're in trouble because we have forgotten this very essence of who we are. It's so clear. And so in being able to realign myself with the very understanding that we are nature, there is no separation. She is not separated from us, that the idea of consciousness that is flowing through us, this God consciousness, is also flowing through her, that she is a sentient being, alive and well. She doesn't need us, we need her. If we think about the very air that we breathe, it's because of her. She creates the oxygen and the ocean. I think the ocean creates 50-something%. Half of our oxygen comes from the ocean. It's the algae that lives on the ocean, and then the sun. The photosynthesis. I remember in biology and chemistry classes, and I never was interested. They never made it exciting. So I kind of switched off that part of my brain, and now I'm remembering all these pieces. I'm coming back into balance, and it's so exciting. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm getting a better sense of this remembering of who I am because I'm listening to her. So my deep dives with this project, Lost Language of Her, what's coming up is a sense of remembrance of myself, and I'm listening through my meditation and just being able to sit with her, and she's telling me everything. And my dad always said, whenever I'd be moving somewhere, across the globe, wherever I was moving to, he's like, but you're going to stay living in nature, right? This is kind of later on in sort of the past, let's say 7 or 8 years, I've been living very much in nature. And he said, because that's where all the answers lie. And I never quite understood what he said by that, what he meant by that. And now I know it's like, yes, it is where all the answers lie. So I'm now getting downloads when I'm sitting with her and I meditate out in nature, or just sitting here. I'm sitting in this beautiful, as I'm talking to you, I'm actually looking out to the jungle here in Costa Rica. The clarity that I get about this remembrance and why I need to make the film is so profound. And as I'm journeying on Instagram, and I haven't spoken on Instagram for a while because as this started to percolate, I'm like, I don't want to say anything until I know what I'm saying. There's a lot of conscious awareness around this. There's a few big names out there. Zach Bush is one of for me, the leaders in that articulation of remembrance. And it's exciting because I know it to be absolutely of the utmost importance in this timeline. And so making a film about that, being able to step into this is not only a gift for me, it's an honor because I will be speaking on her behalf. I will be channeling and listening, and I will be speaking to some of the most connected humans on this planet that are still sitting in her flora in the middle of the jungle, shamans, medicine people. And I've been reaching out to these people through somebody who knows somebody, and I'm getting responses back from them. And they're going into ceremony and asking if they should speak on camera to this subject. And I'm getting emails from people who are in the middle of nowhere saying, I've checked in and this is in alignment and it would be an honor to speak with you. And my heart is just bursting open because of that.
Yeah. So we're gonna dive into this now, but I just wanted to say, because we were talking of balance before we started talking about this new project of yours, I think we need to remember that we are only one of more than 8 million species that we know of on this planet alone. And we are the only one to not be in balance with our ecosystems, which is quite striking. The conversation is also about that. And there are a lot of indigenous representatives, leaders who are getting out of their way to really speak on a global scene. And it's actually worth listening because I think there are perhaps people who are disconnected from the indigenous ways, don't see it as the modern world and the modern way of living, and so are disconnected from this, and I would understand why. But the wisdom that they carry is a wisdom many of us have forgotten, and it's about redoing this connection and ignoring perhaps the tech world and the modern world that, we do enjoy, and the comfort that goes with it and the advantages of it, to also going back to the basics, because we are nature, we are part of nature as well. So listening to nature is also listening to us. Sometimes, we are not these robots separated from nature. AI is not going to feed us, right? So I think that's important also as part of the outlook and the discussion. So for this documentary, you started talking about it, and I'm very interested in this. You plan to sit with elders across Central and South America. So I wanted to ask you, what wisdom are you hoping to capture, and how do you envision weaving their teachings into the film? It's already so interesting to see the way they approach this from what you've already told us.
Yeah, I mean, the permission piece is such a big one. Like when I went to South Dakota, I had to be invited. You have to be invited into these spaces, and in our
A question of respect as well, isn't it?
well, 1,000%. It's just in our ignorance of the honor to sit with those that are not blindsided by the way in which we have evolved as a human species, that desire more and need more and more satiation and fame and fortune. The most I know about fame and fortune is that it doesn't bring you joy and happiness. It just doesn't. There's always this chasing your tail for the next big thing, the next moment of adulation, the next hit or success. You're only as good as your last success. You're chasing your tail. And this is the biggest disconnect we can imagine. And yet, as a society, we all are looking up to and are giving power to pop stars and actors that put on a mask and become a version of whatever needs to be explored for a film. And we are interviewing them like they are the keepers of the wisdom. They are not. Their desire was to be famous, successful, on a stage, be seen, be heard, and get to become a character. It is the most far removed you can imagine from nature. And then we sit with these indigenous peoples, and as I've been witness to, people are coming to take plant medicine, and they're just coming to take what they can take in order to get the wisdom to run back home to say, I just took ayahuasca and I'm so awake and woke and whatnot, to become a guru, to hold ceremonies. Not everybody's doing that. I'm not generalizing here, but I will say there's a lot of misheld understanding. The gravity of that is, I don't even know what to say. I'm bowled over at the lack of understanding when people do that, but it's happening everywhere. And the lack of honoring what they're taking back with them. And so this is why these people who take that medicine and go back into that toxic world find themselves going back to take the ayahuasca a year later, because they need more of that wisdom and that medicine that made them feel connected and understood and grounded. In that toxic world, none of it is existing, so they don't have any way to keep it going. So they have to go back to source to take more, and then they go back in the toxicity. And I'm like, when you go back into that toxic world, what is it that you're actually doing with this wisdom? Are you sitting and it's a misuse of a connection to your truth. The medicine is simply a mirror to your truth. It is within all of us. When we sit with grandmother ayahuasca or grandfather iboga, when we get to sit with these powerful medicines, they are only showing the very thing that exists within you. And when you get to see that perfection, when you get to feel into that powerful part of your truth, then what do you do with it? You run back to the very place that you were running away from. And there's no way to integrate it in a way that truly allows you to become a light in that darkness, in that toxic, road that you are constantly on. I wish for those that get an opportunity to sit with anyone, like a shaman or a medicine person, to fully comprehend what they're being gifted, which is a plug into the truth of who they really are. It is everybody's birthright to remember that, number one. To take that medicine back into the world, to be the very medicine for the rest of the world, be a beacon of light, shine that light, and work using that medicine to bring in an awareness for others to see that that very thing is within all of us. You do not need to take the medicine to know this. And then you be that light, that shining beacon of truth and hope by the way in which you're holding yourself. And that goes back to what we were saying earlier, that you have to have a practice and you have to do the work. And getting an opportunity to sit with these medicine people that hold the millennia of information in their cells, because it's a grandfather passed on to grandson energy, goes back in time. Their desire is to just continue to be in that frequency, and that's why they're in the middle of the jungle. You get to go and sit with them. They get to show you who you truly are. And ultimately, that honor of getting to see yourself, to be able to step into your truth, should be held with reverence, should be held with such humility.
That's funny because you remind me, I have a beautiful book here. It's in French, but as you speak French, I can send you the details. But I think it was perhaps almost 15, 20 years ago I came across it. And it's a couple of French people who spend a lot of time in Central America, South America, and I can't remember in which country they were. But they were telling, I remember from the book, the story of shamans in that particular place where they were, where the shaman literally spent, I think, their first, I'm going to say something wrong, so don't hold it against me, but perhaps spent their first 18 years alone in the dark, complete dark. And they were explaining the type of vision and channeling they get to just by doing this. But imagine spending 18 years on your own in the dark. And I think I want to bring this example because I think that really refers to what you were saying, to really honor these traditions and this heritage that these people have, because how many of us are really aware of this? And I think this is also why documentaries like you create are so important, because it is about telling these stories that we don't really know about, of people who do things and have done things in a completely different way from what we know, and have access to truths that we don't access ourselves, right? And it's just making these connections in today's world, and I find it so important because obviously we don't want to lose that.
Absolutely. I will say, yes to what you remember of the book of a specific tribe. I've watched a lot of different documentaries around the different tribes of Central and South America, and there are many different types of tradition. In America, United States, let's say, alone, there are over 750 tribes in America alone that speak their own language, that have their own way of praying, etc. Can you imagine how many tribes in Central South America? When people say, oh, I'm Mexican, I'm like, yeah, but from what tribe? Because there's a melting pot of thousands of tribes that have different ways of connecting to source, right? The very essence of who we are. Taking plant medicine, she gifts you that information. It's like a fast track to seeing through her eyes. Meditation, breath work, sitting, stillness, sitting under a tree, becoming one with the tree is another way to connect to her innate wisdom. And that innate wisdom lives within us. We are her, she is us. So the film, the idea is, I will get to speak to these wisdom keepers and also to scientists who have proven that she, Mother Earth, is a sentient being that has feelings and makes choices. Oh, there's the sun, must point myself this way, gonna lean back a little bit more. Ooh, that feels good. It desires, it gets hungry, it needs water, that it thinks. Water is a sentient being. It is a God molecule. It thinks. It has 7 properties, and one of them is thought. I had a bath not so long ago as I was watching the most amazing podcast visual. She was speaking on camera, so I saw her visually, and she was speaking about life and death and how she'd lost her daughter 9 days after this daughter was born, and how the spirit of this daughter spoke to her when she left the hospital, and she was catatonic with sadness and grief and confusion at the loss of her child. She went into a 3-day meditation where she didn't eat, didn't sleep. She just went into this space. She was a meditator. And the spirit of the daughter said, I have not died. I'm still here. And gifted her the most incredible wisdom, which was nearly word for word. When my dog Saskia had died, her spirit said the same thing to me. I have not left you. I am still here. There is no separation from life and death. It's a veil. We are still here. We can still communicate with us. In fact, we are of more support and help from this side of things than we can be in the human experience for you. And I listened to this podcast and I was weeping in the bath with joy that I was listening to somebody that I don't know say exactly the same thing, exactly the same information. And I got out of the bath and I felt so imbued with love and knowing that I was on the right path and this understanding. And I went to bed feeling so expanded and connected. The next night, in my little experiment, which I didn't realize would be an experiment until later, I got in the bath, beautiful bathtub, and I'm lying there, and I got fed into the Instagram dark hole, and I spent 45 minutes going through all these different things that is happening on Instagram, and I felt icky and mucky and sticky, and it did not feel good in my body. I got out of the bath. I had a terrible sleep. I had terrible dreams. It was like the water had amplified my experience of being on Instagram. And the night before, it had amplified this ecstatic expansion experience. I've since listened to some amazing scientists and people that work in the field of water and have learned that this is a truth, that she is able to amplify thoughts. And I will say something that I always, when I have a bath or I have a shower mainly, always ask her to cleanse me. When I go into the ocean, I always speak to the body of water and thank her for her gift. So I know that water is like plants, like, our earth being a sentient being, a whole wisdom and information. And she is pure consciousness, just like us. And we are 78% water. So this idea of also, when we speak to this idea of, think of the thing that you want and you can manifest it. What we're really doing is attuning the water in our system to align ourselves to that frequency and vibration of the thing that we want. And just like we've seen when someone writes love on a bottle of water in an experiment and hate on a bottle of water, the molecules of the water shift according to the word, to the frequency, to the state. And just to take it one step deeper I know people have been watching the telepathy tapes and listening to the wisdom of these autistic children that are able to speak to a whole universe that we have no idea exists. I believe it all does. It's the way that I've always been in my experience of living life. I know that there's something more than what we can see. And for them to be able to go into the minds of their parents, many different iterations of this expansive piece, and they speak about water as the God molecule, and that it is the holder of wisdom, and there is more water on this planet than there is land, and we have more water within us. We are made up of water, basically. And so this intelligence is just, we're not even slightly, like, I feel like we're at the tip of the iceberg of the information of what water truly is here to teach us. And so there is so much. There is so much. I think, with Lost Language of Her, I speak to the all-encompassing understanding of Mother Earth. I hope that answers the question.
No, beautiful, and I think a lot of people actually resonate with water. I had so many guests on the podcast at the end who actually refer to the ocean, for example, and really feel that connection very strongly. It almost surprised me because we were not forcefully talking about the ocean or anything related to it in our conversations, but it has come through very, very often. And yeah, for me, water is very fluid, and it's a connection that's perhaps one of the easiest, because as you said, we are primarily made of water as well. So if you can feel that connection, I think that you're already connected with yourself. I see it as a big positive. So I want to say to people listening, I usually ask more questions to my guest, but Deborah is going through the questions without me having to ask. So I let it flow. It's like water, I let it flow, and it's wonderful. So I just want to mention this. Last question on this project for you, Deborah. What do you hope people will take away from the Lost Language of Her, not just intellectually, but energetically speaking?
Yeah, it feels to me like a transmission. The piece for me is that you get to sit and have an experience unlike any film that I know exists to speak to this specific subject. It is not a documentary. It is, in a way, maybe a hybrid of something like that. It's an experience to be experienced, so that you leave having watched this piece of film and something within you opens, and you get to see that you are living in one of the most powerful vehicles called the human body, that is capable of so much more than you can imagine. And by being connected to her, we get to tap into the key of existence. And from that vantage point, we will heal so much of our own disconnect to ourselves, which in turn will expand into the much needed healing of humanity. And I know that sounds like such a tall order. It's like, can 1 hour and a half do that? Well, maybe. I can only hope.
It's part in it.
I hope to plant a seed. And it's more than just a film, that it expands into an educational piece for kids and for humans of all ages, right? Of that reconnection to the spirit of Mother Earth, and to truly understand the nature of who we are, that we are not separate, that she is not separate. And I know that I'm going to be connecting to some of the thought leaders in this understanding, not just shamans. People that are known, that have a following, are definitely going to be included in this. And I'm really looking forward to the partnerships that will be created because of it, as I know that a lot of people are wanting to speak to this subject and have it be a digestible experience, so that you're not like, oh God, that's so scientific, or oh, that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, look, I'm going to throw something out, which I find to be a funny moment for me. When I was making Women of the White Buffalo, I was reading up on a lot of different areas and understanding. And because of the Indigenous women globally going through so much suppression and rape, and really taking away of their power on many levels. I read a book, part of the excavation of my findings. I read a book called Vagina by Naomi Wolf, and it explores the understanding of truly what it is to be a woman, what it is to hold this sacred space within us, and what comes from that space. And she spoke about everything from medicine people, shamanism, doctors, all the way through to war and rape, and how women have been ripped open from that very space so that every part of their being would be destroyed. And in reading this book, I finished it, and I remember so well going, wow, I have one of those. I have a vagina. This is amazing. I have this sacred, powerful thing within me. And it activated that very part of my divine understanding of what it is to be a woman in this lifetime. And I know that, as an example, maybe it's not correlated, maybe it is, but I would say that I want this film to activate the part within you that goes, wow, I'm living in this human body. Wow, I have this deep connection to Mother Nature. I can't wait to step back out into the world with this new understanding of who I truly came forth to be in this lifetime.
Yeah, and it will be a piece of work that is so needed at this point in time of a human experience, I would say. And honestly, having had this conversation with you today, I can't wait to see the creative ideas you're going to channel through this creative work. I'm sure it's going to be beautiful, a beautiful piece. So thank you. Thank you for sharing with us this new project that you are working on at the moment. When do you anticipate, I don't know if that's a question you can answer, but when do you anticipate it will come out?
It is so in the discovery space right now. I have a couple of really interesting meetings coming up next week, which I think would really determine how this will get made. I hope that it will be out in the world in 2027. This expansion, all the information is already out there. It's already being spoken about. It's just how to put it into a sort of finite ball of, a frequency that is digestible. And so that's where the work takes place really for me. And I'm traveling to Brazil next month, and I'm meeting with various indigenous tribes right now and having different conversations. So once the story is really solid, then I get to visualize what that looks like. So hopefully 2020, we will start to speak about this on my social media again, because I've been silent for quite some time soon. And then we'll slowly start to bring this to life so that other people can start to feel into the project, because right now nobody knows about it.
So thank you for sharing this with us today. So a few questions to finish, Deborah, to also talk a bit more about the future. So looking across your work, film, photography, channeling, we talked about teaching, education. How do you see your gifts evolving in service to humanity and the planet? Obviously, your big focus today is on this new documentary. You told us that, with Women of the White Buffalo, this new project is only the beginning, so you see more documentaries further down the line.
I do. I will say that what's coming through, it was my producing partner, Sheila Darcy. She said to me, this is a trilogy. This is the beginning of a trilogy. And I said, oh my God. I said, yes, I know. I feel that I would like to speak to the subject of death and the unseen realms as a possible film project, and God consciousness. Like, what is that? That's another film down the road. Listening to my guides, just tuning in and trusting what I see is very much part of the expanding evolution of this specific project right now. Women of the White Buffalo is exactly the same. I just listened. There was a lot of meditating, a lot of ceremony around the film. There was a lot of going back to the reservation, sitting with the elders and showing them snippets of the film, which people say that's not how you make a documentary. You're meant to go take the information, then go make your film. And I said, well, this is their film, so I don't think I can do it that way. And in that list, Yeah, they got a chance for it to be their voice, you know, as much through my lens as a filmmaker, it's still their voice. The idea and intent with this is the same thing, is that I listen to her voice through my meditations, and I've never taken plant medicine. I would like to sit with both the grandmother and the grandfather, the iboga and ayahuasca, when the time is right. The information that I'm already getting is so clear, and I don't think it's about taking the medicine so I have all the answers. I think it's about listening and going quiet. So there is a rhythm to the slowing down and listening that informs anybody's work, really. So I do think that my sitting more with her and asking myself those questions and documenting what comes through and going into the silence, I think it'll inform the film, and therefore will awaken more of that gift within me as someone that is a channel that can listen to spirits on many different dimensions. I've had these experiences of channeling and just trusting what's coming in. And I hope it'll be clear in the film that it was her talking through me, not me and my ideas of what I think she is.
Yeah, I mean, the topic is so interesting. It's how you crystallize this together for us, right? I really can't wait to see this. Deborah, I always ask the same question to the guests. As a last question, if you were, what would it be and why?
I will say that I've always seen myself as a dark red dragon's blood, I believe is the actual name color. And whenever I do my meditation and I would dance with the spirit of all those that dance with me in real life, they all show up as different colors. And mine's always this beautiful dragon's blood red, almost leaning into fuchsia, like a red wine with a bit more pink. And I see it like if you were to drop that color into water and it becomes that cloudy, beautiful visual of ink in water. That is how I see myself in spirit, that she is my spirit, this beautiful dragon's blood flame. And I since had a dragon, a red dragon of that color tattooed on my arm. It's a baby dragon to remind me that I am, and to continue that medicine, the dragon's medicine. So that's the color and that's the why.
I think that suits you very well, actually. So thank you for sharing with us. And thank you for sharing your journey as an artist, a filmmaker, and a channel with us today. I loved when earlier you were talking of all the languages spoken in Mexico, because I think diversity is so beautiful. It's always been my compass in life. And I think if we can find balance and unity through diversity and listening more to each other and to nature, we will go a long, long way from where we are today. Thank you also for sharing your new project with us, The Lost Language Other, which we can't wait to discover in a few years. For people who want to discover your previous work, Women of the White Buffalo, and you have a website with your photography work, which is absolutely beautiful. We will add the links to the show notes. And thank you also for reminding us that storytelling and spirit are medicine today, and that listening to the voices of women, of ancestors, of the unseen realms, and of the earth herself is essential to our collective healing, and it is so needed today, as we discussed in this conversation. So before we close, Deborah, I'd love to give you the space to perhaps share a final thought with our audience. If there is one message you'd like to leave with our listeners today, what would you like them to carry forward into their own lives?
What's coming in clearly is curiosity. Curiosity is a word that I feel more and more is so important in our daily experience, to be more curious and like a child, you know, with childlike curiosity, see the world again, and to step into nature and in that space, whether it's closed eyes or just allowing yourself to sit in the bounty of her beauty, to just trust what you see, trust what you feel. Just be in that space of knowing that actually all is perfect and divine. All is perfect and divine. and to trust that.
Thank you so much, Deborah. That was a real pleasure to have you on the podcast today and for all the messages and the wisdom you shared with us.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. I'm so honored to get to speak to all of this, and I'm really looking forward to allowing all of these projects to be seen out in the world. So we'll see when and how. I'm sure we'll meet again. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone for joining today.
Thank you.